You know, it's honestly kind of funny to me because since I have a series that I do on albums that I call 10 Years Later, it's funny that I'm now doing a video in this series where I'm talking about 10 years ago. So it's almost like this video kind of doubles as like an I Want to Talk About and a 10 Years Later video, except it's not really a 10 Years Later video. Nevertheless, get ready to feel old that these are now 10 years old. Welcome back to I Want to Talk About, the series where I take a topic, I sit on camera, and I blabber about it. And you know what it is, it's a series within a series, as you could tell from the title. Today, I want to talk about my favorite games of 2014. So you know how the series goes at this point. I get into how the year went, the console landscape in the market at the time. I talk about some big games that I didn't get to play, some notable snubs as I like to call them. The just missed the cut games, which are games that on my personal 0 to 10 scale would have gotten like a 7. The cream before the crop games, which would have been like 8 or 9 out of 10 games that may not be my all-time favorites, but they're still games I greatly enjoy. And then my proper best list of 10 out of 10 games. So let's just jump right into the video. 2014. A year that, looking back, is kind of a weird one for me in terms of gaming. 2013 was one of my favorite years in gaming, so 2014 was naturally going to be a tough act to follow. And in a way, it kinda was, but looking back and writing the script and talking about some of the games in this video, it feels like 2014 is one of those years where the pure amount of games that were really, really good may not match 2013, but the games that I did enjoy in 2014, I really enjoyed. Some of my top, 10 favorite games of all time came out in 2014, so there was still a decent bit to be excited about, even if there wasn't the sheer quantity of games from a year like 2013. To get into what the landscape of gaming looked like at the time, specifically with consoles, 2014 was the first full years of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, the first time they really truly got to battle it out. And as far as sales are concerned, the PS4 pretty much won by a landslide. Even with the fact that it had a somewhat lighter lineup of first-party games in 2014, it seemed like the PlayStation 4 just had a generally gamer-first mentality to it that just made it feel more confident and more worthy of a purchase than the Xbox One, especially given that Microsoft basically spent 2014 kind of picking up the broken pieces of the console's reputation, following its disastrous announcement the previous year. Kicking the Kinect out of the bundle, dropping the price, introducing a few more noteworthy exclusives. For the most part, it seemed like Xbox actually largely made the right moves in 2014. The problem was that with PlayStation coming out swinging so hard as soon as the PS4 was announced pretty much, and basically doing everything that it could to stomp on the Xbox One, Sony just basically had everybody on their side. Well, at least in terms of consoles, everyone was on PlayStation's side. From here on out, let's just pretend this thing doesn't exist. One thing that did exist in 2014, whether you know it or not, was Nintendo. And yeah, if nothing else, in 2014, Wii U sales were up. It does help that 2014 was actually a pretty great year to be a Wii U owner in the sense that the first-party lineup was pretty strong that year. And you'll see that as we move along in this video. It felt like 2014 just had so many bangers from Nintendo, and even despite the Wii U's issues, if you were a hardcore Nintendo fan such as myself in 2014, that was probably the best year to be a Wii U owner. Sadly, it wasn't really enough to make anyone that comfortable about the Wii U's long-term potential, and not even its heavy hitters were able to push the Wii U past the 10 million sales mark just yet. Unfortunately, despite those great exclusives, the Wii U was too flawed of a console and had too much bad stuff going on to really become a huge success for Nintendo at the time. And yeah, the 3DS was still keeping Nintendo afloat, though the fact that sales were going a bit down was not really going to quell people's Nintendo-related worries, given how bad the Wii U was doing. I mean, yeah, Nintendo would turn at least a slight profit at some point. Again, they are known for making their consoles a little more affordable than everyone else, and I think that helps. But even then, the console was still struggling to the point where people were really just that worried about Nintendo, and some people thought they were going to exit the console market altogether. Yeah, I know. Oh, and since I mentioned the 3DS, this was something I kind of glossed over in my 2013 video. I kind of just added it as some text on screen a little later. But 2013 was also the year that Nintendo released a hardware revision of the 3DS, the Nintendo 2DS. I guess in the moment I just forgot that it was anything important, but yeah, I think that the 2DS coming out was meant largely as a move to bring the 3DS to a younger audience, given that As I said before, the 3DS had some kind of age limit to the 3D. If you were like 6 or under, they were like, do not play in 3D. So there was that, but I think it also felt like, as good as the 3DS did back in its life, and as much as it was a pretty great handheld with some great games, I think the release of a 2DS kind of just felt like Nintendo throwing their hands up and saying, yeah, this whole 3D thing, it was a fad. By 2013, the general interest in 3D was pretty much donezo, and I think Nintendo was aware of that, so they decided to just give people an affordable version, an even more affordable version, rather, of the 3DS without the 3D, because they probably figured, you know what, people probably won't care either way. And I mean, your mileage may vary if you cared either way, but nevertheless, this was an option. So that's the first-party stuff, and as far as the third-party stuff, there were only a couple notable things that I found worth talking about. One thing that was notable just on a personal level was that 2014 was the year that Neversoft kind of closed its doors. They initially kind of merged with Infinity Ward to make a super studio, but eventually they did basically shut their doors and even burned the eyeball logo that they had and whatever. That was actually pretty sad. In general, Neversoft closing was very sad because I obviously have mentioned that I'm a big Guitar Hero fan, and they handled the Guitar Hero series, so obviously that was important to me. And they also were the makers of a lot of the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater games and other such Tony Hawk games, so losing Neversoft was pretty sad at the time. I remember it kind of snuck up on me, but yeah, losing them was really sad, and they were a pretty big third-party studio in my youth, akin to what I mentioned in the last video when I talked about THQ. Except that was a publisher, but still, same basic factor. And also, as far as notable third-party things, for better or for worse, 2014 was the first year of the Game Awards. I mean, technically it existed prior as like the Spike VGAs or whatever it was called, but 2014 was the first year that it became what we now know as the Game Awards. Jeff Keighley's award show where he basically gives out awards sometimes and spends more of the show just showing off trailers of games and things like that. I even remember at the time that that was a big deal, because what the hell won Game of the Year? Well, I can't answer that, but I feel like no one was talking about it, because what more people were talking about was the fact that during the show, Nintendo showed footage of a Wii U Zelda game they were working on. Whoa! I mean, yeah, of course it was really exciting. I mean, Wii U Zelda game, everyone was looking forward to that, but nevertheless, that's the point. That the Game Awards, not as many people cared about the awards, they cared more about the announcements. Starting to think they should change the name. But it's still a notable thing, because as many problems as we tend to have with the Game Awards, and as easy as it might be to make jokes here and there about Jeff Keighley, this was a pretty notable deal, and to this day it remains the premier award show in gaming. And I guess it kind of showed that gaming was starting to become that big of a medium that now it was big enough to have its own award show. I think I've also heard that viewership of the Game Awards has at times surpassed that of other major award shows, so that's a pretty notable thing. I know it's helped by the fact that it's streamed on the internet, so there's that, and that might help some people out, but nevertheless, it's kind of a pretty big deal. And like I said, yeah, we can criticize the award show till the cows come home, but it's still a pretty big deal, especially as an award show that's still going on to this day. Really should just call it the game announcements, though. So that's the intro, and now we're on to the games, and in terms of notable snubs, I will say there are a few really huge games from 2014 that I just didn't really play or didn't really get into. Perhaps some of the year's biggest games, even. As far as the snubs I have listed here, all of these games were pretty well loved back in 2014, but we have Shovel Knight, which I did play a little bit of, but for some reason I just couldn't get into it. I don't know why. There was also Dragon Age Inquisition, which was the Game of the Year winner that year, and it was a pretty huge deal, although I know a lot of people have kind of turned on it since. I myself have just never really played Dragon Age that much. And even though I've mentioned before that I'm a licensed game apologist, you might be surprised to know that I've never played Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, or at risk of destroying my credibility, never actually seen a Lord of the Rings film. Yeah, some of you are probably raising torches and pitchforks and wondering how the hell I have a screenwriting degree. So given that I didn't play those huge games in 2014, what the hell did I play? And given that I haven't seen Lord of the Rings, what the hell have I watched? That's a topic for another day. So what did I play in 2014? I am so glad you didn't ask. Sonic Boom! Sorry, I don't know, I just wanted to make a joke. This game was really bad. Oh, and I also played The Letter, which I would probably say is one of my least favorite games of all time. Maybe even my worst game of all time that I've actually played through and beaten. Granted, of course, it was made with a bag of peanuts as a budget by like one dude, so I'll be a little nicer to it, but yeah, it was pretty bad. Okay, second least favorite of all time, because Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue on the Nintendo 64 is still the worst. I'm going off on a tangent. What did I play in 2014 that was actually good? Let's start with the Just Missed the Cut games. We've got 3 here to discuss, or to blow through pretty quickly rather. The first of them being Child of Light, a nice little entry-level turn-based RPG for those who aren't usually into the genre, such as myself, even though I think some hardcore fans might be a bit turned away by how kind of basic it may be. There was also Wolfenstein The New Order, a very fun first-person shooter that unfortunately kind of flamed out for me at about the last third. And then Hyrule Warriors, which relative to the Wii U's lineup in 2014 was definitely the black sheep, though it certainly had some fun action-based gameplay if you like Dynasty Warriors, with some great homages to Zelda's history as well. Okay, now we can actually get into the cream before the crop. The 8 and 9 out of 10 games that I played, that I really enjoyed even if they weren't my all-time favorites. And we've got a fair few to discuss here, so let's just jump right in. Also, I haven't said it, but if you hear a helicopter whirling in the background, I want to say that's because the Eagles are playing tonight. Go Birds. I did not anticipate this would happen, but I'm just going to try to power through as best as I can. Anyway, cream before the crop, let's go. Whoa! Finally! We actually have a PlayStation 4 exclusive game to talk about. Who would have thought? Now again, given that the PlayStation 4 started pretty slow as far as first-party titles are concerned, we're not going to really be talking about many of them in this video. In fact, this is, I believe, the only one. But thankfully, Infamous Second Son is a great one to talk about. And again, don't worry, we'll talk about plenty of PS4 exclusives as we move along in the series. Initially, this was meant to be a launch title for the PS4, but it was moved back a few months to give it a bit more polish. And yes, that left the launch lineup a little high and dry, but ultimately what came of it was a great game and a very good reason to grab a PlayStation 4 back in the day. Now I'll admit, I didn't quite love Infamous Second Son as much as I loved Infamous 2. Again, it wasn't like a huge difference, but I would still pick 2 over Second Son. And I wouldn't necessarily say this game was like a next-gen powerhouse that really showcased the extent of the PS4's capabilities. Granted, consoles have kind of innovated less and less over time, so it was going to be hard to do that anyway. But what it did do was provide a fun and exhilarating game that brought more of the super smooth combat and excellent platforming that Sucker Punch has prided itself on even to this day. The traversal elements afforded to the new character Delsin that you see here on the cover are some of the best in the series. The karma system feels more balanced, and the open world environment of Seattle feels great to explore. Also, a bit of a minor thing, but if you play the game on PlayStation 5 now, it actually plays at 60 frames per second, which is obviously a dream. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the first 2 games ran at 30, so it's nice to be able to play this at 60. And overall, while Second Son is not the best the series has done, it's a worthy follow-up to Infamous 2 that stands out as a great game. Still wish the first 2 were available to play on modern platforms, though. I remember being really pumped about Kirby Triple Deluxe back in 2014. The Kirby series had really been revitalized a few years prior with Return to Dreamland, and as someone who had enjoyed the franchise for a long time, it was nice to see the 3DS finally getting some Kirby love. And with this one, it was really Kirby doing what he does best, which is to say, putting out a fun, lighthearted, and all-around solid little platformer to enjoy as a quick little breather between some of the beefier games in your backlog. Beyond having all the elements that typically make a Kirby game great, this game also had the Hypernova ability, which allowed Kirby to suck up even larger objects. Do you ever wonder what his digestive tract looks like? Or if he even has one? The new abilities added in here are also plenty of fun to use as well. And I also remember this game being one of the 3DS's best uses of the 3D technology. Even as a 2.5D platformer, there was a great sense of depth in the 3D element of the game, and it feels like they really put a lot of care into utilizing the handheld's hardware in a really great way. A lot of times when it comes to the 3DS, it's probably easy to recommend just playing the games in 2D, but Triple Deluxe is a game I actually recommend playing in 3D. Turn that slider up, I think you'll enjoy it. And all of this combines to make for a plenty fun adventure that's still well worth your time, even with what we've gotten from the Kirby franchise since. Okay, so I only have a few more videos where I constantly bring up MLB The Show before taking a few years off, and this is one of the last times that I'll be bringing it up. I promise. I actually remember being oddly excited about MLB 14 back in 2014 because it was the first entry on the PlayStation 4, and while the Matt of today doesn't ooh and ah at graphics, there was a point in 2014 where I kind of did, especially because I was playing so much MLB The Show, which always prided itself on being the most realistic baseball game on the planet. And with this game, I oddly remember being so interested in the beards. I mean, baseball players in general have some funny facial hair, and especially around this point, beards were a pretty big deal in baseball. I mean, look at the previous year's World Series champions, the Boston Red Sox. Sure, they won because they were a genuinely loaded team, but they also won because they had beard energy to the 1000th power. I mean, they even had nicknames for the beards too. That was crazy. Though the whole tugging on the beards thing kind of grossed me out a little bit. As someone who has a bit of a beard, I would feel weird if someone tried tugging on mine. Sorry, where was I? Ah yes, MLB The Show. Yeah, they really upped the power of the beards here. I mean, just look. Jason Worth's face looks like smudged ice cream on PS3 compared to PS4. As far as the game itself though, it actually did introduce some neat new features that I really enjoyed. Like the player lock feature that lets you control just one player at a time, a la Road to the Show. And especially the quick counts feature where the game automatically assigns a pitch count in every at-bat, which definitely helps speed the game along. It's one of the features I use most frequently even to this day in MLB The Show. And again, as a sports game you can only improve so much, but this one actually brought in some nice new content to keep the series fresh on the PS4. And goddamn were those beards majestic. I already talked at length about Toontown in my 2003 video, so I'm not going to talk your ear off about the game as a whole here. Basically, if you don't know, Toontown was a Disney-created MMORPG that was incredibly popular back in the 2000s. 10 years after its release, though, in 2013, Disney announced that the game would shut down, and even though I hadn't played it in years, I was heartbroken. I can't help it, that game was my childhood. Thankfully though, the internet basically did everything in its power to keep the game alive through private servers, with Toontown Rewritten being created a week after the game's official closure, and officially seeing a public release at some time in 2014. Now of course they had to scrub most of the Disney references in an attempt to keep the Mouse House off its ass, but it ended up working, and even without those Disney characters, even without the charm of seeing Mickey Mouse walking around in the playground at Toontown Central, try saying that 5 times fast. It's really beautiful to not only see fans keep the game alive, but also add exciting new stuff and continuously update the game in new and interesting ways. I still even play it myself from time to time, and even as a non-MMO guy, it's amazing that the game remains as fun as ever and still plays super well. This isn't just some nostalgic relic from the 2000s, it's a great new version of a fantastic game from the 2000s. And unlike the subscription model, this one's free, and if you're like me and you're a Mac user, it does work on Mac as well as PC. Go give it a look if you haven't already. Yes, oddly enough, I'm counting the 2 Smash Bros. Entries in 2014 separately. Yes, they are in that camp of being similar but equal, but my overall opinions on them are somewhat different, so they're going in different camps here. And you'll understand why in a minute. Either way, yes, Super Smash Bros. 4 was released in 2 different iterations in 2014, and the first of them was the franchise's first handheld venture on the 3DS. Finally, Smash was playable on the go through entirely legal methods, and I was happy about that because Smash 4 was a very polished game. I'll get into it a bit more later in the video when I talk about the Wii U version, but it was super cool getting to have this game on the go. It came out when I was a junior in high school, and it was definitely something I got a lot of mileage out of at the time, constantly bringing it to school with me and playing it when I had free time, even playing it with some friends here and there. Nowadays, it's a little hard to go back to because for whatever reason, playing Smash on a 3DS feels really uncomfortable in my hands. But at the time, it was great getting to bring this everywhere, and the 3DS exclusive Smash Run mode was much better than the Wii U's Smash Tour mode. Sometimes I wish it came back in some way. Obviously, I know it was meant for 3DS hardware, but it would be cool if it came back in some ways. Even so, Smash 3DS was excellent for its time, and while it might be hard to return to today, it was still a great way to experience Smash 4. Though it wouldn't be the best way. Okay, so we got a few more Skylanders games to cover, and to be honest, this was one I wasn't as heavily looking forward to when it was first announced. Sure, I enjoyed the previous games and played them a solid bit with my brother, but by the time the first gameplay was coming out for Skylanders Trap Team, I was starting to feel the sameness factor kicking in. A part of me worried that we were heading towards Skylanders becoming another one of those another year, another game type of things, which is not uncommon for Activision. But thankfully, Trap Team still managed to succeed by way of bringing that trademark charm and wit that always kept me interested in the series. And there were actually a few new things here and there that I did enjoy, like the new Skystones Smash minigame. Given that Skystones wasn't in Swap Force, it was nice to have it back in general, along with the ability to actually trap the villains and play as them with little key-type toys. And those villains were honestly pretty humorous and charming, which did add to the fun, and they felt good to play with too. Yes, it did have its issues, and it may not have been the most groundbreaking Skylanders game, but all in all, Trap Team was a nice entry that ultimately surprised me and is still worth playing if you're a Skylanders fan. Some of you might not know what this game is, but you absolutely deserve to. Early on in the Xbox One's life, Sunset Overdrive came along as a console exclusive, though it eventually got a PC release as well. Coming from, who would have guessed it, Insomniac Games. Yes, that Insomniac Games. The Insomniac Games that stuck with PlayStation for the better part of its life, made the original Spyro trilogy on PlayStation, made Ratchet & Clank on PlayStation, made the recent Spider-Man games on PlayStation, and is now even owned by PlayStation, actually linked up with Microsoft to make a game exclusive to the Xbox One. Who would have thought? And sadly, it didn't seem to make a huge profit for Insomniac, and honestly, that's a crying shame because Sunset Overdrive is a fantastic and criminally underrated game that deserves a lot more love. It's an open world game about an employee of this energy drink company called Fizzco who's trying to stop the company from giving people this energy drink that's basically turning everybody into zombies. It's absolutely bonkers, but it's the kind of game that works because it knows just how bonkers it really is, and it plays with that. There's a very colorful, bright 90s-esque aesthetic, which was especially refreshing at the time compared to all the gray, grimdark, and brown games of the 7th generation. And combining this with the traversal mechanics being centered around ziplining and rail grinding, the game almost had a bit of a Jet Set Radio or even Tony Hawk's Pro Skater kind of vibe. It's incredibly fun to play with exciting action and weaponry, including one of my favorite video game weapons, the TN Teddy, a gun that shoots explosive teddy bears. Badass. It's the kind of game that wants to do nothing but give you a fun time, and it does that in spades. It's a balls to the walls kind of game with many of the hallmarks that make Insomniac great, and it's definitely worthy of your time. I'd love to see this franchise come to PS5 or get a new entry, but I guess Sony is too busy spending $385 million to make Spider-Man 3. I mean, like, sure, I want Spider-Man 3 and all, but Sony, lower your budgets! Preteen me would honestly be quite shocked to see me talk as positively as I do about Halo, given that because he didn't like shooters, Halo bore the brunt of a lot of undeserved harsh criticism from a version of Matt who barely knew any better. But more than that, 16-year-old Matt in 2014 would probably be surprised to see Halo the Master Chief Collection in this video, not because of a disinterest in Halo, but because of what he got to witness when this dropped. Initially a very anticipated collection, especially given that it had the new Halo 2 Anniversary Remaster exclusively available in it. This was initially a hot mess at launch because of insane amounts of bugs and online matchmaking issues that made the game feel like absolute hell to play. Microsoft would even have to issue an apology and offer players some free stuff to kind of mitigate the struggles. You know it's rough when we get to that area. But to 343 Industries' credit, yes, I'm giving them some. They did continue to work on and improve this collection in numerous ways to the point where it became a pretty great way to experience this series. And it feel like it actually appreciated in value, especially after 343 added re-releases of Halo 3 ODST and Halo Reach to the collection to further improve its value. Now if you want to play pretty much every mainline game before Halo 5, don't worry, this collection's got you covered. This was the way I first experienced the series, and it was pretty great going through all the campaigns through this collection. It may not have a lot of new content to make it essential for longtime Halo fans, but as a whole, it's become a very good collection and a great way of getting into the series for the first time. I'm very happy I stopped listening to Preteen Me and actually decided to give the Halo series a chance because, well, it's got its issues now, but it was a really great series. And I'm glad I finally got to experience it with the Master Chief Collection. Speaking of remasters, Kingdom Hearts HD 2.5 Remix came just a year after the 1.5 HD Remix, and much like how 1.5 brought the final mix re-release of Kingdom Hearts to the States for the first time, 2.5 also brought Final Mix to the West for the first time. But in this case, it wasn't just one Final Mix. Yes, we got Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix for the first time, but it also brought over the Final Mix version of Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep, because, would you believe it, that game was actually good enough to get a Final Mix version on its own. Oh, and this collection had that theater mode from 1.5, but this time it had the cutscenes for recoded, so, yeah, woo. Either way, compared to a lot of remaster collections of the time, and even now, the remix collections for Kingdom Hearts felt far more essential, as they were bringing previously Japanese-only versions of these games to America for the first time, which made this collection, and obviously 1.5, feel far more essential regardless of whether you were a longtime Kingdom Hearts fan or someone who was just getting into the series for the first time. Add in that the remastering job was quite nice, and Kingdom Hearts HD 2.5 Remix was a fantastic release. Yes, much like 1.5, it feels like this is everywhere now, and the frequent ports of it might make you forget just how special this was back in the day, but all in all, this was a great collection and a fantastic grab, even as a PS3 game that came out a year after the PlayStation 4. Also, I don't know if you noticed it, but I'm wearing my Kingdom Hearts shirt. I did actually kind of plan that this time around. And last in the cream before the crop, would you believe that even as a huge Nintendo fanboy in 2014, I actually kind of laughed at the idea of Captain Toad Treasure Tracker? Not that I didn't think it looked good, I was planning to play it, but I was kind of confused by it. It was basically a full game version of the Captain Toad puzzle sections that were in Super Mario 3D World, and while those were fun little appetizer-like mini-games, there was a part of me that couldn't help but wonder if Captain Toad was the right thing to kind of spring into a full game. But this is Nintendo, of course, the one publisher who's willing to do goofy shit with their franchises for the sake of making a fun game. And with Captain Toad, they managed to do that. The puzzle-based gameplay has a solid bit of challenge without being too overwhelming, and the game succeeds thanks to it featuring one hallmark that Nintendo has always done better than anyone: amazing level design. It's so clever at every turn, and it was this game, weirdly enough, that first made me realize just how Nintendo dominates at the whole level design thing. Also, the game has a fair bit of replayability, which is good given that it could have fallen into the camp of being a bit of a one-and-done kind of game. And while I never got to play the Switch re-release, I understand it also has some levels based on Super Mario Odyssey, which is pretty sweet. No matter which version you grab though, Captain Toad is a quietly great game that I'm happy to see got some new life on the Switch, and if you haven't played it, I highly recommend you check it out. Okay, so that took longer than I thought it was going to. Now we're on to the actual best list. But first, we do have an honorable mention. Again, I usually reserve honorable mentions for noteworthy remasters from a given year. If it's a remake, I could put it on the list. If it's a remaster, I can't. So I gotta leave it as an honorable mention, but 2014 was the year of The Last of Us Remastered. Given that I talked so positively of this game in the last video, I'm not gonna stick too long on the remaster here. But yes, Last of Us got a PS4 remaster a year after the release of the original game, largely because, well, I don't know, it probably should have been saved for the PlayStation 4. I don't know, the 8th generation had a remaster problem early on, and it was kind of confusing to constantly see what games were getting ported and remastered around this time. I mean, a year or two later, Deadpool got ported to next-gen consoles. That was something. Nevertheless, The Last of Us Remastered is still the same amazing game that came out in 2013 with a nice enough visual facelift and the ability to play at 60 frames per second, which is obviously a huge blessing. It was also nice that it added a photo mode and even featured the Left Behind DLC, which honestly I never actually played. What? I don't play DLC expansions much. Get off my back. Largely, I'm just kind of talking about it because it's the version of the game that I played, and while it wasn't the most necessary thing on the planet, as a remaster to a game that's among my favorite of all time, it absolutely gets the job done in a big way. Still have no idea why they did a remake on the PS5 though. Okay, so now on to the best list. We got 4 games here, and would you believe it, they're all Wii U games. Again, the Wii U might not have been the best console on the market, but damn was its first party lineup killer. So let's jump in because I've already been recording for almost 45 minutes, and the helicopter that you might have been hearing throughout this video is pissing me off. So, starting at the number 4 spot, perhaps for a while one of the more unheralded games of 2014, especially on the Nintendo front, I gotta go with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Admittedly, this is one of those games I didn't even give enough love to back when it was on the Wii U. I was excited to play it, sure, but again, my inability to stop playing Super Smash Bros. Or Baseball or Guitar Hero for a long enough time to actually beat my games meant that this game didn't get as much playtime on the Wii U for me as it should have. I wouldn't even end up beating it until the Switch re-release came out in 2018, so yeah, there's that. But make no mistake, as much as people were not super excited about Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze back in the day, being that they were hoping for Retro Studios to do something other than another Donkey Kong game, I absolutely love this game. I think I would still put Donkey Kong Country 2 ahead of it as far as best in the series, but if I do, it's pretty much barely ahead. They can honestly probably interchange with one another. Tropical Freeze is a 2.5D platformer with plenty of variety, excellent controls, and tight overall platforming, along with the immaculate level design that Nintendo has always been known for, and an utterly beautiful visual style. Again, if I was so interested in MLB The Show beards, you knew I had to be interested in Donkey Kong's fur back when this game came out. I did indeed ooh and ah over it back in 2014. And yes, I know there was a lot of talk back then and even now about how difficult this game was, and I would agree, but it wasn't like undoable or anything like that. nor did I feel like it was fake difficulty, which is a term for difficulty that's more a problem with the game's design as opposed to player error. In this game, it felt like an honest, fair challenge that didn't feel like issues with the game design or anything of the sort. Plus, with the Switch re-release, they added Funky Mode that was very heavily memed when that came around, but it does help ease the challenge a bit without taking away from it entirely. All things considered, it's definitely one of the finest 2.5D platformers that I've played, and it is very much worthy of your time. Though if you haven't played it and you're looking to get into it, you might want to wait until its predecessor, Donkey Kong Country Returns, gets its Switch re-release in January. I mean, I played them in the opposite order and it turned out fine, but you never know. At number 3, you had to know this game was going to be on my best list, though you might be surprised it's not at my number 1 spot. I gotta go with Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. This is why I had to separate the two games, because Smash Wii U absolutely makes my best list proper, so I had to kind of separate it from the 3DS version. It shouldn't be surprising to hear this as someone who's mentioned that I'm a huge fan of the series, but all the way back at E3 2011, as soon as I heard that a Smash Bros. Game was coming to the Wii U, I wanted a Wii U. This was the game I bought the system for, and even though there were a few Wii U games that I would put in front of it, and you'll see those soon enough, this was by far the game I sunk the most time into on the Wii U. I played it a lot on my own Wii U, absolutely, but I also played it a bunch with friends on their own Wii U's. I even did fictional Smash tournaments with a friend of mine and created fake characters for it, just like that fake Mario Super Sluggers League I mentioned in the 2008 video. I promise this is not something I need to talk about in therapy. I also, back in the day, entered a few tournaments for this game. I wasn't particularly good enough for tournaments, but I still entered them. And I also played it a lot when I was in college. At my college, which is now basically dead, RIP University of the Arts, I never stayed in the dorms, but one of the lounges in the dorms had a Wii U in it, and the lounge was open to all students as well. So during my sophomore year and junior year leading up to the release of the next entry, I was playing Smash Wii U in the dorm lounge on a near weekly basis, sometimes even doing it multiple times a week. And that had its good and bad moments, sure, and I could talk about how those situations made me more cynical to playing Smash with other people, absolutely. But I won't, because I just love Smash Wii U, and I have too many good memories with it to overall outweigh the bad. It's an absolutely beautiful looking game with a boatload of content, plenty of great single-player material to make up for that Smash Tour mode that I mentioned earlier, a great roster of characters and awesome stages, and a nice set of improvements to the physics to bring this kind of nicely in between Melee and Brawl. They struck the perfect balance as far as speed and everything like that, and it was really, really good. This was also the first game to add DLC fighters and stages, and let me tell you, the way I exploded seeing Mewtwo return, or seeing characters like Cloud and Bayonetta make their way into the game, that was a time. Genuinely, Cloud making it into Smash, that blew me away even at a time when I hadn't played a Final Fantasy game. That just kind of made me, like, my mind explode and go, oh my god, literally anything is possible right now. Oddly, as bad as the Wii U era was for Nintendo, being a fan then was a lot of fun for me because it felt like Nintendo was like my little secret, and that console gave me a lot of great memories in spite of its flaws. Super Smash Bros. For Wii U was one of the most important games of that time for me, and even with Ultimate's release, I still like to go back to it sometimes. Especially because Captain Falcon was my main, and he is so much better in Smash Wii U than he is in Ultimate. Still a great game, and one that I obviously have an incredible fondness for. But what the hell could be ahead of it? If there are 2 entries ahead of a Smash Bros. Game, they better be frickin' good. Well, hopefully they are freaking good to you guys. My number 2 favorite game of 2014, I gotta go with Bayonetta 2. Ironically, with all the waxing of poetic I'm about to do about this game, this was another one I didn't actually play at all when it first came out on the Wii U. Again, my Guitar Hero Smash and baseball addiction stopped me from playing some games as much as I should have, so much like Tropical Freeze, I wouldn't end up properly beating Bayonetta 2 until the Switch re-release in 2018. But I remember watching my brother absolutely destroy this game back in the day. He loved every second of it, and he put so many hours into it on the Wii U. And eventually, when I finally got around to playing it myself, I absolutely saw why. The first Bayonetta was already like a 9 out of 10 game to me, but Bayonetta 2 was such a huge improvement that, to me, it made Bayonetta 1 look like the worst action game you can think of by comparison. It just felt that much better. The combat was improved in so many incredible ways to feel deeper and more fast-paced and fluid than the first game, and as much as Bayonetta 2 brings more of the campy thrills of the first one, it also really ups the stakes in tremendous ways with plenty of badass action and boss fights that are even better than that of the first game. Even though it's not a very long game either, it's perhaps the most thrilling, pure action-based game I've ever played, and it's one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. Or rather it was, but recently something came along and kind of just scooted ahead of it. You'll learn what that is in due time. Nevertheless, Bayonetta 2 is a crowning jewel of the action genre, and it's a game I can't recommend highly enough. Platinum Games does incredible work, and this is perhaps their greatest in my opinion, and it's well worth your time, especially now that it's on the Switch and plays at 60 frames per second over there. If you haven't played the series yet, well, what are you waiting for? Go play it! But yes, there's still one more game ahead of it, and obviously I mentioned that it's a Wii U game, so you probably won't be surprised to hear what it is, unless you're thinking about my past history with this franchise. But my game of the year for 2014, my favorite game to come out in 2014, for me personally, it couldn't be anything other than Mario Kart 8. Okay. So if there was one game back in 2014 that was able to break my previous obsessions with Smash and baseball and Guitar Hero like I mentioned, it was Mario Kart 8. I mentioned in some previous videos that I didn't get as deep into Mario Kart for much of its early entries, and it wasn't really until Mario Kart 7 where I really got super into the series. But let me tell you, when Mario Kart 8 came out, I absolutely fell in love. I don't know what it was compared to the other games in the series, but Mario Kart 8 was one of those games that I just struggled to put down back in 2014 and 15. And even as Smash became my most played game on the Wii U, Mario Kart 8 also saw plenty of playtime as well. To me, this was a game that absolutely blew my mind as far as just being incredibly beautiful to look at, especially on a system that was seemingly underpowered. Well, I guess it wasn't seemingly, it was underpowered. And as far as the gameplay, I feel like this has some of the smoothest, tightest, most accessible controls the Mario Kart series has ever come through with, which makes it incredibly easy to just pick up and play. The courses are also among some of my favorites in Mario Kart, with the Star Cup in particular being honestly my favorite cup in the entire Mario series. And it was also great to see how much they added to the game to make it even better. The DLC courses on the Wii U were fantastic, and coupling them with the new addition of 200cc speed was unbelievable. I also thought the anti-gravity mechanic was super clever and super interesting. It was kind of silly being able to kind of ride on walls or kind of ride on a track upside down almost. And it made a fast-paced game even more fast-paced, which is awesome. This is at least like one of my top 4 favorite games of all time, and it's still a game I can't say enough nice things about. Though I'm going to have to hold a few of those nice things in because we're going to be talking about the game again in a later video. In due time, dear friends. Ugh. My throat really hurts because I was messing up a lot in this video and I was getting distracted by this helicopter. But that's 2014. Again, not the most packed year as far as the number of games, but in terms of the games themselves, a lot of really good ones. And 2015 was another year I remember being really fun for gaming, so that's one I'm definitely looking forward to jumping into as well. Until then, this is all just my opinion on 2014 as a year in gaming. What did you guys think of 2014? What were some of your favorite games, some games that I also might have not mentioned in this video, the games you played the most, the memories you have from 2014? And as far as this video's individual question, like I've been doing across the last few videos, I mentioned that 2014 might not have been as memorable as 2013, so I guess I'll ask you this. What was your personal least favorite or most forgettable year for gaming? What's the year that you really don't look back on as fondly as far as video games are concerned? What year had the most unexciting new releases, just not a lot of big games, whatever you would say? Maybe you might even say this year. If that's the case, then yeah, you could say that too. Either way, whatever your thoughts, opinions, and experiences are, leave them down in the comments below. Let's keep this civil and have some fun as we like to do. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe and support some of my other ventures that I have linked in the description, thank you. If not, it's no big deal. I totally understand. And yeah, 2015 videos coming next, but I need a break. I've been filming for almost an hour. I didn't think the raw footage would get anywhere close to an hour. Again, my throat hurts, and I really need to get a shower. Either way, I'm definitely excited to talk about 2015. There were some gems that year. Can't wait to get to them. So stay tuned for that, but until next time, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.